You're listening to Sox in the Basement, a production of the Broadcast Basement Limited, where every show is 30 minutes of good and comes from a basement bar on the south side of Chicago. Pull up a stool, pour a cold one, and join us right now for Sox in the Basement. Heard everywhere podcasts can be found, and always at soxinthebasement.com. I love the fact that the Chicago White Sox, in the middle of a historically bad season, constantly give us material to talk about on Sox in the Basement.
Oh yeah, it's really kind of polite of them, really, if you think about it.
They make me think that I have to have more than 2 shows a week. They go from comedy, let's say, to absurdity. Since the last time we talked, for example, the first you have the comedy moment, where Eloy Jimenez comes out and says that was the first time he had felt 100% in a long time on the same day that he hurts his hamstring because he has no legs and he breaks anytime he tries to use his body, right? Like, that was comedy. That was something where you read that, you laughed out loud. I'm telling you right now, 80% of White Sox fans, at least, saw that quote the first time they saw that Eloy says he was at 100% for the first time since the left abductor strain or whatever he said, which is a good period of time. That's the first time I've been 100%, and then my hamstring went out. That's so White Sox. Everybody, you guffawed, you chuckled. There was a reaction, a spasm, if you will, that your body made like a noise. Where you're like, ha! Like, that was something you did.
Just that uncontrollable guffaw, yeah.
Right.
How could you not laugh at that? I mean, it continues to be unfortunate that the guy does not have the ability to stay healthy, but at the same time, it's also you cannot buy timing like that. Like, I feel 100% for the first time, and there goes my leg.
Right, exactly. And then you get to the absurd over the weekend, and I'm going to tell you, Monday was my favorite day. Memorial Day, what a treat. Because it wasn't really the day before with the flat comments, right? Or I'm sorry, the effing flat comments, like Pedro's swearing. He's like that teacher that just swears that one time, right? Like, he just kind of throws it in there, like, oh, I used the F word. I mean, come on.
And now I'm Tom Berenger in the substitute because I swore.
Right, exactly. Like, you're no Ozzy, buddy. He would have used that about 47,000 times this season already. He would have been making up new swear words. He'd have been saying words that I would have had to go to a thesaurus to look up and try to figure out what the hell they meant.
Compounding words like a pharmacist compounds, drugs.
That's what he would have been doing. But the whole flat comment, and then the way that a lot of players kind of struck back in that. Like, Corey Lee was the one that everybody kind of focused on. But Garrett Crochet kind of pushed back on that. Gavin Sheets pushed back on that. But Lee being the guy that really Pedro doesn't want to play, right? Like, it's not to his benefit to be playing as much as we think he should be playing, even though he's one of your best hitters. And I'll tell you this, somebody who might turn out to be a real team leader, because he may be a rookie. And there were people in the comments and social media when I was commenting on this over the weekend, the whole flat thing and the Corey Lee comments and me saying, I'm here for the revolt and I'm totally with Corey Lee. There were people who are sitting there saying, well, he's a rookie and he's only been up there for a couple of months and he should keep his mouth shut and the veterans should handle it. And my response was, who are the veterans? Who's the veteran leadership on the Chicago White Sox that's supposed to push back? Is it one of the veterans that you have that are hitting under 200 who, if they said something right now, nobody would care? I like the idea that you have a catcher who runs your battery, is up there with confidence, and is ready to win baseball games, who's probably sick of losing and is like, this is not how I envisioned my Major League Baseball career with this record, this team, and this guy managing me, who really should be playing me more often, and now he's going to push back and say we're flat? Where were you for the last month or so, Pedro, while I've been sitting back there fighting for playing time? Like to me, Corey Lee was speaking for his team. And you may not like the fact that he's 25 years old or whatever he is, and he's in his first couple of months of Major League Baseball at this level. But that's how leaders are born. That's how he's speaking, and then Sheets the next day is essentially backing him up. He has the locker room more than Pedro does. So I don't care if he's a rookie. Okay, if the kid made a comment and he wasn't the only one, like if he was alone, you'd be like, all right, well, maybe the rook needs to shut up. He wasn't alone. And that was the first take I took off of it all weekend when we were looking at this, was like, this kid wasn't alone in what he said. He just said, and the thing is, he didn't even say anything that bad. He was just basically like, that's his opinion, but I think we played a really tough guy. And what was funny was, Orioles broadcasters and people covering the team were kind of laughing like, who's this Grifol think he is? That was a really good pitcher having a really good performance. That's the guy you want to say your team was flat against? They've been a lot worse against a lot worse pitchers this year than that game.
Well, yeah, I mean, let's face it. You're talking about a guy who was a Cy Young runner-up last year. And granted, he's been hurt. He hasn't pitched much this year, and he's just coming back. But that's a guy that spent last year shutting down a lot of good teams and a lot of good lineups, much better than the heap that's been posted, for the White Sox most of this year. And if you're complaining that a rookie is stepping up and trying to take control of the locker room, or that he's speaking out against the manager, shut up. What is this thing that only a veteran can take care of it? That's where you get into problems, where you're sitting there going, we can't bench Andrew Vaughn because he's our locker room leader.
Well, yeah, that's perfect. I was just thinking that when you said it, Ed. That's the perfect name to use there, because last year I was told he was the leader. I hadn't seen anything that made me believe he was, but the PR department deemed him that. The organization decided he was that. And instead, we have one that naturally did something that somebody in the locker room who is a leader would do. And I don't know if Corey Lee will turn out to be a leader. Corey Lee could be hitting 215 by July. I don't know what he's going to be doing. But in this moment right now, he's done more to make me think that the locker room listens to him than Andrew Vaughn ever made me think. I was just told by the PR machine that is the Chicago White Sox that was the leader. I haven't seen him do anything. I haven't seen him lead by example, that's for sure.
Well, and the other part of this, too, is that you run into these situations where, for years, and I'm not picking on Jose Abreu, but for years we were told Jose Abreu was the leader in the locker room, yet Jose Abreu himself seemed to kind of bristle against that. Like, he wanted to go out and lead by example, which is fine, and be the ultimate professional, right? And that's why he even let himself get sent down by the Astros recently. But he was not the vocal locker room guy. Paul Konerko was sort of a hybrid of lead by example, but he would say something when he needed to. He just was in an era where he didn't really need to push back against Ozzie over anything. He
probably did. I mean, I seem to remember once or twice he did, and Guillen respected it. Guillen sat there and said, well, put a C on his chest. He's my captain. Like, there was...
Right. So, were there other veterans? I mean, there were guys on the 2005 White Sox that, frankly, I think you could argue had more seniority than Paul Konerko to a certain degree.
Frank Thomas, first ballot Hall of Famer, had more seniority than Paul Konerko.
Carl Everett, I think, had been in the league a bit longer than Paulie at that point. And you don't have to ordain Tommy Pham the leader because Tommy Pham's 35 years old. You don't have to ordain Eric Fetty the leader because he's the oldest pitcher on the starting staff. You don't have to ordain... Wisdom and age do not mix in real life or in baseball, okay?
Especially if you're going to get rid of those players because you keep talking about moving them. Like, maybe let natural leadership that's controllable for the next 5 years blossom inside of your locker room.
And history is replete with catchers being the team leaders. Corey Lee is involved with the pitching staff. He is a position player. He is in the lineup. He can sit there and say, flat my ass, Kyle Bradish is a really good pitcher. Corbin Burns is a really good pitcher. These guys are really good. The Orioles are really good pitchers. We're trying hard. We're busting up there. We're trying to do what we can. We got overmatched, man. Tip your cap to those fellas. He can do that, and Gavin Sheets and the other guys in the lineup can sit there and go, hey, that's true. I was really concentrating hard. I was really focusing. That guy's really, really good, and he was on today. Man, was he on. And you can be not flat, right? But Corey Lee can also sit there and step up and talk for the pitchers and sit there and say, it's not their fault either, okay? It's not Garrett Crochet's fault that we didn't score any runs, and he can defend. Catchers are naturally put in leadership positions. That's why there's a ton of ex-catchers that become major league managers too. I don't know why Pedro right now at Memorial Day is sitting there deciding that now he's going to be feisty, now he's going to be angry, now he's going to be the big accountability guy, when if you're going to sit there and pick on this and you're going to pick this apart, you're going to sit there and go, two of the guys that have consistently performed all year, and Corey Lee and Gavin Sheets are the ones speaking up. They have the right to speak up. They are the guys that are going to take this team forward.
Sox in the Basement listeners, switch to a new age of life. Keep mom and dad, grandma and grandpa out of assisted living. Make it so they can get around on their own and live independently. With stair lifts, ramps, grab bars, lift chairs, and even bathroom remodeling, you need to go to Hyatt Home Medical Equipment. They're going to work with insurance and have 0% financing for qualified individuals. Hyatt Home Medical Equipment also has the latest and greatest in CPAP machines. Unhappy with your vendor? Switch and get supplies directly mailed to you. Plus, test it all out at their big, beautiful showroom on the south side. They also have the latest in continuous glucose monitors. Learn all about Hyatt Home Medical Equipment at hhme.com. We have a former first-round pick who sputtered when he first tried to debut with the Astros, got traded to the White Sox and sputtered at the end of last year, who did not make the team out of spring training except for when Stassi ends up injured. And Lee gets an opportunity and makes the most of his opportunity. And we have a guy in Sheets who was discounted by the organization, heck, discounted by us in spring training.
Very much so.
And earned his way and really knows he's the starting first baseman, okay? Corey Lee knows he's the starting catcher. And Garrett Crochet begged to be a starter for years, and nobody believed in him. And it was basically like, well, we'll see, we'll give him a shot. And he's turned out to be an ace-type pitcher and a pleasant surprise. And it's interesting to me that the guys who have been discounted the most by management, by Pedro, by the team, are the guys who I see with these quotes that are coming out of this weekend. Isn't that incredible? Guys who might have a reason to have a little bit of a chip on their shoulder, who watched a guy in Pedro Grifol mismanage this team out of the gate and wasn't good at it last year either. And his quote to Scott Merkin on Memorial Day is, "This is not about wins and losses. This is about the responsibility we have as individuals and as a team to come out and give the very best we have every single day." And I will add to that quote, Pedro, unless your name is Andrew. And these guys know that. They see you giving Benintendi all the rope in the world, and there's no accountability because he's making $75 million. They see you giving Vaughn start after start batting up at the top of the order when he hasn't earned it, pushing playing time away from Gavin Sheets and forcing him to go out and play out of position because somebody in the PR department and somebody in management decided he was the face of the organization when he never earned it. And you have Lee sitting there wondering if he's going to play or not because the other catcher was hitting .083 as of today, for some reason gets 50% of the starts. There's a reason why these are the guys that are getting angry. They're professionals. Every single person on that team had to play their ass off from the moment they were a little kid through all these different travel leagues, through high school, through college, through minor league systems. They sat there and they got up early in the morning, went to bed sore, and earned their spot on a major league roster. And you can't tell me that they sit there and say, well, I'm really angry, but I got to bury those feelings deep down inside because I haven't earned the opportunity to say that I disagree with something. Look, I'm going to tell you something right now. Corey Lee will be in Major League Baseball longer than Pedro Grifol, at least as a manager. Somebody might keep him around as a bench coach somewhere, or maybe he'll be a bullpen guy, or maybe he'll be down in AAA. But I think Corey Lee's going to have more Major League Baseball time, meaningful Major League Baseball time than Pedro. And that's the thing. These guys are professionals. They're young. They're hungry. They're what you want, and it should be encouraged to have them that hungry and that angry. And I found it really interesting when watching the PR machine that is the White Sox on Monday. I'm sitting there and I'm watching the game with my father, having a couple of beers. And the first thing that struck me, and I said it out loud, and he was laughing because I really believe this about this team. This is not a professional Major League Baseball team that's number one goal is to win championships. This is a public relations machine. This is a baseball organization, a community baseball organization that plays a ball game on the field so they can charge you more for a hamburger because it's better at the ballpark. They don't care about the wins and losses. They're putting on a show, and they want you to not be critical of the show. You don't get to say anything bad about the show. You don't get to point out the flaws in the show. You don't get to sit there and say the guy who's running the show is doing a bad job. You're just supposed to be positive. And if you're negative, they will complain about the negativity throughout the entire broadcast. They will. They will sit there and they will constantly point out things that you, with your own two eyes, know not to be true. It was repeated over and over again in the broadcast yesterday on TV that they came out hot, the White Sox. All right, a couple of singles is hot for you. We didn't even get a run that inning. Coming out of a game where your manager called you flat, you didn't do anything. I mean, like, that's the thing, but they pushed his narrative. They started off the first inning trying to tell you there's no division in the locker room. I still haven't heard one single question from the press corps about whether or not there's division in the locker room. Bruce Levine basically apologized and stuttered for 5 minutes to get the question out just to Pedro. Did you hear that some people might not have agreed with you? So Pedro could give the cookie cutter answer of, I'm doubling down. Doubling down is yelling the same thing again, or actually saying something worse about the team, not just going, I'm doubling down. I mean, it in all honesty, it's like nobody wants to pin him to the wall when they're doing the interview. And then the moment the game starts, everybody's trying to tell you, pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. Everything's fine over here. We just saw it. We just saw the players upset. We know there's clear division in the locker room. And you have to look really closely. And again, I say this, look at Ozzie. Look at Ozzie in the postgame on Monday. I mean, Garfien tried to set him up with a very easy way to say that he loved the fire of Pedro and that he supported Pedro doing it, because that was the headline going into Monday, that Ozzie, like the network, the mothership, the White Sox talk, they were sitting there and their tweets were basically, Ozzie Guillen thinks it's great that Pedro did this. But when he asked him in the postgame on Monday, Ozzie was like, well, you know, if you're going to do that, you really got to do it more than just once. Why did you wait till now? And maybe that's why your team's reacting the way it is. Like, he didn't sit there and say Pedro handled it right. He didn't. He's dancing around it because he wouldn't have waited 2 months to say the things that he said, and then he would have had more substance the second day when he heard about what the team said. He wouldn't have just benched a really good catcher for the day when he's trying to find offense and put a guy in hitting 080 something at the beginning and was hitting 083 at the end. And that's the difference right there. That's why this guy shouldn't be the manager of your baseball team.
It's one thing for us to sit here and say it's nice to see Pedro showing fire. I mean, that's like when Tony La Russa was here saying it's nice to see him awake and moving around, or when Jerry Manuel was here, the same thing. Or when Terry Bevington was here, nice to see him, like, you know, not picking his nose, I guess. I don't know what you would say about Boom Boom there, but there's a lot of things you can say about a lot of managers, and showing fire is always a good thing. But again, you want to talk about coming out flat. You came out flat in March and April and for the entirety of May. So why not sit there and say in early April, why are we coming out flat? We need to figure this out. What are you guys doing? Get some hits, refocus, go the other way, try and get the bat on the ball. You know, coach these guys, do something about it. And don't just sit there when you get to Memorial Day. You and I get to sit here and say, as your dad has always told you, at Memorial Day, you are what you are. You and I get to sit here and say that. We could be fiery on Memorial Day for the first time if we want to, because we're not major league managers and we're not in charge of this team. But the whole thing was the culture of accountability that was going to be part of this White Sox team and this White Sox era of baseball. And you can't wait 2 full months into the season, then all of a sudden get pissy that the team's not coming out really smoking hot against, you know, a team that last year made a deep playoff run. And you can't sit there and all of a sudden get snippy with your better of your 2 catchers because he spoke out and was like, hey, that's not fair. That's basically what Corey Lee said. It's not fair to us, you know? And you can't sit there and just say Ozzie loves what Pedro's doing when Ozzie doesn't love what Pedro's doing. Ozzie clearly hasn't loved what Pedro's doing, disagrees with how Pedro's running things. He might be appreciative of a little bit of fire, but again, what's the point of fire if you're not going to do things differently? And I'm sorry, but benching Corey Lee for Martin Maldonado, if that's putative because Lee openly disagreed with his manager, well, that is just junior high baby playground BS. Okay, that's the kind of thing that little league coaches do because my dad was too vocal and this other kid's dad was nicer about it. So I get sat on the bench. Well, actually, I got sat on the bench because I sucked at baseball. But
the players see that. The players have to see that. Think about this. Pedro made it worse on Monday.
Even Martin Maldonado, I guarantee you, I know the man's got pride, he's a major league player, but I guarantee you, he understood the assignment when he was with the Astros. He understands the assignment now. His job is to help Corey Lee take his job. And Martin Maldonado, I'm sure, looks at that and goes, well, that's stupid. He's outplaying me.
Think about this. Think about it on your couch. Think about it in your car. Think about it while you're having an award-winning burger, sitting at the bar at Cork and Carry at the Park at 33rd and Princeton, the proud sponsors of Sox in the Basement, pregame, postgame, in-game. Bring the whole family over beforehand. Get them fed before you head over to the ballpark. See more at corkandcarry.com. But Pedro lost the locker room even more on Monday with his actions. You don't think that they notice that you've got two guys that you're always batting in the top 5 in Andrew Vaughn and Andrew Benintendi, who just consistently are just shoved in there, and he'll give all the time in the world to, and he won't take them out, and if he does bench him, he benches them for a day, and they're back for the next 6, right? So you don't think that those guys don't see that. But then after the flat comment, you take the young guy in Ramos, who I know had 2 days where he wasn't getting a hit or anything like that, but you put him on the bench. You took the young guy in Lee, who said something, and you put him on the bench. The young guys are the only guys in which there's accountability from Pedro. It's never the other guys. It's just a certain group of guys that have, so you're cherry picking who you're going to hold accountable. And then here's the thing. In the 9th inning, when he's trying to get runs to come back in the game, what does he do? He puts Lee in. Because he knows that Lee's a better hitter than Maldonado. What does he do? He brought Ramos in the 9th inning too. So if you're a player and you're watching this, you're sitting there going, hold on a second, let me get this straight. I'm not good enough to start in this game. So-and-so over here is never held accountable. But when you need a run in the 9th inning, now all of a sudden you want my bat? Why didn't you want my bat for the other 8 innings? These guys aren't stupid. They're not. Any athlete, an athlete at the high school level would look at his high school coach if they did it and say, you know what, forget this, I'm out. I don't even want to be a part of this. Like any athlete at any level, if they saw that kind of management in the locker room, that would cause problems in the locker room. He made it worse on Monday by doing what he did and then basically showing them all when the chips are down and I need a hit, I'm going to go grab these guys that I put on the bench during the day. But I went and I started the other guys that I never hold accountable for anything. And that's why he shouldn't be here anymore. I mean, it's crazy to me. Any other manager in any other organization at this point would have been fired. Would have been fired long ago and definitely would have been fired on Monday afternoon after that game was over. Definitely would have been fired. Okay? You are off to a historically bad start. Your locker room is split. You actually made it worse yesterday in day 2 of it. After you heard the discourse on Sunday, you made it worse with the way you reacted as a manager. There's no way that that's doing well in there. You got to use your PR machine to try to convince us all that we don't see what we actually see. I just don't understand it at this point. At this point, the only explanation, there's only 2 possible explanations, okay? 1, Chris Getz is not allowed to fire him because he's under contract for the end of this year and next year, and that's just a Jerry Reinsdorf thing. Or 2, Chris Getz is lost as a general manager. Just absolutely lost as a general manager because he won't get rid of this guy. It's one or the other. If it isn't Reinsdorf telling him he can't fire him at this point, he should go too. And I don't want to hear the argument of what's the point, you're going to lose all these games. The point is now you're getting in the way of development of players that actually do matter. Now you're actually hurting the culture in a locker room when you should be building it in a lost season so that when you get to next season, your you've at least built something.
Well, here's the point, okay? And I'll use a real world. I'm involved in Special Olympics. My son's involved in Special Olympics. And a year ago, we had a scenario where we're at a practice and there's supposed to be some teenagers that are helping the little kids during the practice, okay? There's too many kids. It's a track and field thing. There's too many kids. And so these teenagers are supposed to be keeping the kids in line, helping them run through their drills and all the things that they're supposed to do, right? And these are special needs kids, so they're all over the place as it is. One of the dads, one of the assistant coaches, one of the adults in the room, comes storming in because things are a little out of hand in the gym. And one of us went to get him and say, hey, can you help us get control of this? And he comes in and immediately picks on one of the little kids, one of the special needs kids, and starts yelling at them, at the kid and a couple other kids about their behavior, until I had to step in and grab the guy pretty much and be like, it's the teenagers, it's the coaches that are screwing around and not doing it. It's the veterans, all right? Nobody has any respect for this guy. We haven't seen him around much after that. But nobody had any respect for the guy because he's picking on the low-hanging fruit. And that's what Pedro is. He's bullying his young players. And he's picking on the low-hanging fruit because it's very easy as a manager to sit there and say something like, well, I got to teach these young guys how to do this the right way. But if you watch veterans not getting it done, okay, and I don't know that Andrew Benintendi, for example, isn't in the locker room saying, expressing his frustration and telling these guys this is not how you do these things and being a leader. I don't know that for a fact. I don't know that Andrew Vaughn's not doing it. But Pedro not holding a veteran accountable the same way he's going to hold Brian Ramos accountable, the same way he's going to hold Corey Lee accountable or a young guy accountable, is just the definition of poor management, because you have to be even-handed. You want to show these guys how it works, then it doesn't matter what your contract status is or how old you are or how many years of service time you have. You are held to the same level of responsibility for your play and your conduct, whether you're a rookie or on your way out of the major leagues at the end of your career. That's how you create accountability. Okay, when you sit there and say, I can yell at the kids who are acting up, who don't know no better. I can yell at them all day long. But if the veterans who are also acting out and not doing their job, who do know better, are getting a free pass, then that means I suck at my job and all I am is an overpaid bully and a crybaby. Because then I go to the press and say, well, they're flat and I'm doubling down. So that's all you are, Pedro. Okay?
Meanwhile, we're recording right now before we find out the move. So I'm curious what you think is going to happen. Mike Clevenger to the IL with elbow inflammation. Jake Woodford is coming up to make the start. He needs to be added to the 40-man, so somebody's losing a job.
They could put Eloy on the 60-day and just sit there and go, we're done.
That's the thing. Like, at some point, he becomes untradeable. Like, he's got to get back and start hitting like crazy for you to get a bag of balls for him before the deadline, because you're not picking up his option at the end of the year, right? You're not picking up his option. You're not picking up Moncada's option. There's a lot of these guys, like, it's like once you get to the point where you know you can't trade him, why would you even have him take up roster space? You might as well just leave them out because they're not part of the plan.
Yeah, and then it's up to them to prove with their agent that some team should take a flyer on him next year. Well, now, getting back to your point about Chris Getz, either Chris Getz needs to go too, or Chris Getz is just being hamstrung by Jerry. It's decisions like this where we get to see whether or not I think Chris Getz is overwhelmed or overmatched, because if his personnel decisions with the players make sense, then you can sit there and say, okay, there must be some other reason why he's not getting rid of Pedro.
I felt like he's made sense most of this season. Like, he actually has been handing players to Pedro, and it almost is like you get the feeling like he can't take Maldonado away from Pedro because he doesn't have anybody else to be the backup catcher.
And if you give him another veteran,
he's just going to put that guy in.
Yeah, that's just it. And you don't necessarily. I'm guessing that he's looking at what he has in the minors as far as young guys and journeymen. He's probably sitting there going, well, it doesn't make any sense. I'd rather have Maldonado up here. And it might be something too, where, like I said, Maldonado might understand what his role should be on this team, but he's just doing what Pedro tells him. If Pedro puts him in the lineup, he's going to go up. He's going to go out on the field and he's going to line up and he's going to take his at-bats.
Over the last 6 days, Corey Lee has played the last 6 games. Corey Lee has played in 3 of them, and Maldonado has played in 3 of them.
And that's just, you shouldn't be doing that.
It's baffling. And it's weird because your quote, and I read it earlier, was this is not about wins and losses. That's what your manager said. Your manager is about trying to build here. He knows that he has no chance of making a playoff, so wins and losses don't matter. And yet he still feels like he should throw this Maldonado out there. Like, he's still, I don't know how that helps the development of the catcher either. I've heard this argument of like, well, you're using up his knees when he's young. Give me a break. Give me, that argument drives me absolutely nuts. Like, I'm not saying he should play 7 out of 7 days, guys. Okay. But he's more than a 50-50 split. He should be able to handle a regular workload that a catcher in Major League Baseball as a starting catcher should get. He's earned it. That's why he's annoyed. Gavin Sheets should be standing at first base instead of dropping balls in right field. You don't think that aggravates Gavin Sheets? You don't think he's tired of that? You don't think
he knows.
You don't think he doesn't know that he would be much more comfortable standing at first and that he's earned that spot? So why does he have to go out there and be ridiculed for dropping fly balls? You don't want to be ridiculed.
Not only publicly ridiculed, but Gavin Sheets, when he's playing out of position, and he might be trying his best, okay? But when he does that, when he makes those errors, when he drops those balls, he also has to go and he's got to feel bad for the pitcher that he let down, right? Because that's his teammate. That's still his friend. It's not like, offense and defense on a football team where they may not talk to each other or something like that, or they have a rivalry. I'm pretty sure Gavin Sheets, when he drops a fly ball, is going to go up to whoever was on the mound and be like, I'm so sorry, man. I'm trying out there. And, and I'll try and do better. And you have that natural, like, damn it, I let my team down, right? And I'm guessing Gavin Sheets is not that guy, okay? This whole thing is just, if it's player development, then Chris Getz, his moves will continue to make sense from the standpoint of, I'm taking away all of Pedro's binkies and security blankets so that he can stop going wah Martin Maldonado and actually start playing guys that matter. Corey Lee should play about 120 games this year. That's about an average workload for a major league starting catcher if there's a primary and if it's not a strict platoon or a straight split between two guys.
Instead, he's going to end up playing 80.
He's going to play about 80 games, which is
crazy.
Sox in the basement. Sox in the basement. Sox in the basement.
Sox in the Basement. Heard everywhere podcasts can be found, and always on soxinthebasement.com.